Alrighty, so thank you, Alex, so much for organizing it, and thank you, everybody, for joining. Let's talk today about don't replicate Excel dashboards in Tableau, how to convince the most stubborn users to analyze charts instead of tables, and that's a mouthful, so let's simplify it. Don't replicate Excel and Tableau, analyze charts instead. And I'll be touching a lot of topics that Kai was mentioning, because a lot of parts of business BI are quite similar and boiling down to, will my user be using it or not? Let's dive into it. My name is Igor Garlowski. I'm a founder of business intelligence consultancy DataDune, and I'm a visual analyst and data engineer like many of you either already are or will become. Those are a couple of tools that we are using: AWS, Snowflake, Alteryx, Tableau, to mention a few. Those are a couple of clients that we've been working with, you might recognize, like Siemens or McKinsey. And what are we going to learn today? We'll focus on the following: how some companies go from this to this, but actually they should use this. Okay, so let's be a bit more precise, and let's talk about the uncomfortable part of the visualization work. The part where people don't actually use what we did. Creating charts is a technical skill, and if that's your job, then definitely you should know how to do that. But learning dashboarding or data engineering was never the difficult part. The difficult part is to know what to create, for whom, and how to create a change. So let me explain. Which of those two options would you prefer? An amazing series of dashboards, polished, working perfectly and giving your users the ability to do magic, or an average dashboard which provides some insights? Now, I bet at this point, majority would say, hey, let's get a magical one. But there is a catch. Nobody is using your super dashboard, but users would use the average one. At this point, you might ask yourself, wasn't this about Excel versus visualization? The goal of this presentation is not to convince you to prefer charts over big tables. You should know it by now. The goal is to understand the following. What is the reason for which users resist using your dashboards? In my experience, the change of the way we visualize things is one of the core issues when it comes to not using the new dashboards. We can summarize all of this with change management. How do you think users react to new methods of visualizing data after 15 years of using only Excel and tabular data systems? So we start with a massive Excel and tabular systems. Then we spend money on Tableau, developers, upskilling, security, and that's what we get, an Excel within Tableau. But hey, now we have all those fancy filters on the side. So, change management and user resistance. Tableau itself, in its mission of increasing data literacy, describes user resistance as one of the 4 main challenges of data literacy. So the solution, change management and specific dashboarding techniques. This goes together. The situation is as follows. We get a new tool, make it Tableau, make it Power BI, make it literally anything. Your users are unhappy because it's a change, and that's very natural and very human. We must manage this change somehow and make them happy, and we shouldn't get discouraged with the one grumpy guy. There's always one grumpy guy that doesn't want to do it. Case study 1. I've been working once with a media company, let's call them Amazing Radio. And Amazing Radio had multiple stations. And for years, they've been comparing different metrics in Excel to adjust their strategy. You know it. You've been there. You've seen it. They were slicing and dicing the data using different filters and manually analyzing it. They would perform those daily, weekly, and monthly. Manual data import, some cleaning and calculations, an absolute waste of time. I mean, those people are experts in their fields, and they perform tasks which at this point AI is capable of. And then, of course, make PowerPoint presentation out of it, or input this Excel into another Excel. To change that, Amazing Radio brought Tableau and hired all those new young analysts trying to disturb their work. True story, this is how my mother describes this type of change. A compromise was to, you guessed it, make those tables and filters in Tableau. And that's how it looked like. Now, on our complexity level, let's judge this scenario as 1 out of 3. There's no risk of the data being leaked, and they used to do their job, and they can still do that. But the potential is lost. If we let users do things faster, they will have time to work on other more important things. And if we let them do it better, they might uncover other insights. Now, you might be thinking that this is not possible. Surely spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a new technology would yield different results. And to this, I'll tell you one thing: never underestimate the user resistance. Advice 1, participate, listen, and adjust. I did 2 things at the beginning of this engagement. I requested to participate in the meetings where the Excels were presented, and I shadowed a few users working on those Excels during the day. The conclusion, users were predominantly looking for max listeners, min listeners, comparing it to the previous numbers and investigating listener spikes. Nothing extraordinary, taking time every single day to do those things. Why did they do it that way? Because they trusted the data and conclusions, because they were crunching in data, they were downloading it, and they knew what's happening to it. It was all about the trust. So the solution to it, KPIs and charts, answering the right questions, allow data exploration, and give people data health indicator and last updated indicator. So the work they did every day, this is the KPIs part, now they don't have to do it. And you are trying to mitigate the lack of trust by showing them the data. Now they can look every day at this report and make sure this is data they expected. They have the indicators just in case something would happen. And with time, they will stop. With time, the trust will be built. By listening to our users' needs, we can address the underlying issues and adjust our work accordingly. Case study 2. Last year, I've been working for a client from a financial industry who was migrating legacy system into Tableau, and of course from a tabular system. So we have this horde of people who are used to, for over decades, slowly loading tables with filters. Let's represent it with Excel. That's because the majority of users would download a large chunk of data locally since the system was so slow. So they would actually be using Excel in the end. After 2 months of working on the dashboards, and let's pretend that this is the dashboard since I have a lot of NDAs around it, we achieved a satisfactory result. What was the first question when users saw this dashboard? How do we download the data? Now, on the complexity level, the scenario is a 2. Now there is a risk of the data being leaked. Instead of having it secured on a server, people keep it locally, perhaps sharing it with each other via email or other systems. And there's also a risk of wrong calculations. How? Using the outdated Excel, human error, people can just by mistake use yesterday's Excel instead of today's data, and everybody performs some ad hoc calculations on their own. Do you know how many methods there are to calculate one thing like profit? A couple of people doing it differently across the company is yielding totally different insights. Not surprisingly, users not used to analyzing charts were preferring the Excel version of it. Now, participate, listen, adjust. Advice number 1. After having multiple discussions, we discovered that it was a matter of trust in the data. Users didn't know and understand Tableau as a new technology. Again, replace Tableau with any other tool. They weren't familiar with using charts for the analysis. And the tip 2, empower them. As we heard in the previous presentation, we could have just forced our users to have only those dashboards. Or instead, we address the issue at its core and create an enablement plan. Each user was upskilled in Tableau. Each team had an access to a Tableau Power user for any further questions and enablement. An organization implemented Tableau evangelists, which were general business users, in contrast to only having developers. Those were the relatable users. So people could actually ask questions, exactly what we heard before about the sessions with Power BI doctor. So empowering your users allows them to increase their engagement levels and ease down the difficulty of change to a new tech. Use a carrot, not a stick. Case study 3. The final story goes to our outliers, the people which are the last ones to change and adopt new technology. Mom, I made this slide thinking about you. In a successful adoption of new dashboards, we found out that there are several users which weren't interested in Tableau. They would get into very heated discussions when presented with a dashboard not containing the tabular data. So I came up with this little trick based on a psychology book that I was reading at the time. It claimed that all humans are lazy. And I don't mean here that any of us particularly is lazy, but that if we can choose less effort, we often subconsciously take it. Now, this is the initial dashboard. You can see the tabular format of it. And this is the same dashboard with the closed tabular view. Now, mind the little button that opens and closes the tabular data. Here, not so little. Now, here is the trick. At first, you publish the dashboard, having the table open by default like that, so users get exactly what they expected. And you try to convince them to click this button. And after a while, you publish it again, having the chart open by default. You make the button to show the table less standing out. Your users get with time accustomed to the new design by seeing it every time, and they stop performing the additional one action of opening the table. Hence the lazy part. Again, the first phase and the second one. By exposing your users constantly to a new format, we allow them to get used to it and experiment with it. And by using the correct design, you drag the attention to certain elements, and there is a whole science about it. Totally worth getting into. So to summarize, participate, listen, adjust, empower, expose, and design it properly. Thank you for listening. Q&A. If you would like to work with me, reach out on LinkedIn. Here are the details. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Igor. Let's check out the questions. I have a question about recordings. They will be available, I hope, tomorrow or maybe by Monday. Don't worry. We will send all this. Okay. So I have a question. Could you give us an example, if you remember something of the most stubborn user that you negotiated?
Most stubborn user. Well, I actually have quite a handful of those. Most stubborn users would try to do everything to stop the change. They would be going around the consultants to the superiors or even somebody higher, trying to say the worst about the new system. So there will be the kind of users who would say, previously it was better. I was working faster before. Did you know how long it takes me to get adjusted to the new system? They would totally disregard the new things. And now there are actually ways to go around it. And it is to choose another as stubborn person as the one that you are talking to. Now, if you try to flip the one person just tiny bit, the stubborn people, they tend to complain together at those things, and eventually they will progress and empower each other. The biggest problem is that people are not relatable to each other. If I'm going there as a consultant who speaks many technologies to somebody that uses only Excel, I'm not relatable to those people at all. The change has to come from somebody similar. So when you're talking to somebody working a lot with Excel, find somebody else just tiny bit less stubborn and try to convince this person and then match them together. The most stubborn person might never be an expert in Tableau, but that's not the point. The point is that this person is using the tools and is actually getting value out of it.
Okay, it's great advice for me to find a less stubborn user, to recruit him as a change agent to convince the most stubborn.
Precisely.
Great idea. Okay, so